Welcome back to the Better Than Best Academy. Today's guest is nothing short of extraordinary. He's a brain tumor survivor turned life coach leading 10,000 to freedom. His name is Ahab. I'm saying that right, right?
You
Ahab?
are, yeah. That's right,
Awesome.
yeah.
His name is Ahab. Now, Ahab, before we get to your story, I love to open up sometimes with this question. What will make today's conversation extraordinary?
'Cause it's just two people being open, being honest, without any filters, and actually just being genuine. I think that's always a recipe for something interesting. We all have a story to tell. We all come from completely different angles, and as long as we're here and we're present and we're able to be open and completely ourselves, it's the only way it can go, right?
That's right. I love it. It's gonna be good. I can already tell it's gonna be good. We're connected through the Discord channel that we're a part of, and it's gonna be a good conversation. With that said, if you could summarize your past, your current work, your life's mission, and why it matters, how would you summarize that?
Well, I don't know if I could summarize it, but but I will try.
Totally fine if you can't summarize it. If
Yeah,
you
well,
wanna go as deep as you want, go for it.
I will try and explain it. I think finding that kind of purpose it's been a journey. It's been a long journey. I think, my story, wherever my story starts, I think it kind of begins with the illness. I think a lot of my development, I think like my life completely changed after that point. I think there was a complete, yeah, that was a definitive kind of starting point for me. So I think after that, there was a real, I think for the first maybe 5 years, I was kind of just determined to kind of ignore a lot of things that happened. I wanted to just kind of carry on with the blinkers on. I didn't want to acknowledge anything that had happened to myself. I was determined really to live life the way I always lived it. As much as understand what that is at the age of 13, right? I'm going to live life the way I always have done, the way that I'll always be the way that I was. So I guess it was kind of like a definite period of trying to just power through and do things the way that I'd always done them. And then there was, I guess, a reckoning. There was a period where I had to, well, I was, I guess, forced to kind of recognize that a lot of things that had happened. And then there was a good maybe 5 year period of trying to actually figure out what that meant for myself, trying to build myself back up, try to understand what this is and what this person is now, who this person is, because it's slightly different to before. I think like, when you have a physical injury, sometimes it might be a bit kind of easier to account for that. Think, okay, right, I'm missing a finger, or like, I don't know, I'm missing a limb. And then you have to find maybe a more obvious way to kind of navigate that. Not that it's any easier per se, but like, you can see your limitations and then you have to kind of deal with them, right? When things were kind of changing up here, it was a whole different kind of layer of, I guess, exploration and understanding that you kind of had to go through. Kind of those lines are a lot more kind of blurred, what's normal, what's not normal, what's a problem or what's not a problem. So it was, I guess, another 5 years of really just trying to figure that one out. And then once I'd kind of gone through that whole 10-year period post treatment, that's really when I started to have an understanding of kind of what my purpose was and what I wanted to do in my life, right? Because I guess for those 10 years, I was really still surviving. I was really still, hadn't really found my feet. I think my feet were taken from underneath me and I never really found them again until at the end of that 10-year period. So I think, it did in terms, because we're talking about purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I think, so for me, the purpose initially was to find kind of stability. The purpose was really just trying to keep my head above water if I could find a way to do that. So when I went to university the first time, so I went to university the first time, I did physics and philosophy. So I was studying that for a while, and I was still dealing with a lot of things. I hadn't, well, avoiding a lot of things, but not even dealing with them really. But it meant that I ended up dropping out of that. I wasn't able to keep up with kind of what I was doing. I didn't really have, yeah, I think that I didn't really have a center at that point. Uh, so then for me, I guess my purpose then was to try and find grounding, try and find stability. Uh, and I had to find that through something that was meaningful to myself, because I knew that if it wasn't meaningful to me, that it wasn't going to stick. Uh, it wasn't going to be something that was going to, help me find my way really. So so it became, I guess finding stability, right? So when I went back to university, I was looking for, something that had meaning to me, something that was going to help me kind of, do something good in the world. And I came around to radiotherapy. So when I'd started the treatment, I mean, it just wasn't a good time in my life, right? And it was something that I really did ever want to talk about. It wasn't something that I was really good at kind of avoiding my hospital appointments. I didn't really want to talk to doctors about it. It was like kind of you did what you had to do. Now I just want to be left alone to live my life, do my thing. So thinking that I would ever go back into a radiotherapy department was like, no, never, never ever going to do that. So to kind of do like a complete 360 come down to actually working in that profession was, yeah, something that I never really expected or never really thought I would do. But by that time, I'd had 10 years since treatment. It kind of ticked all the boxes for me. It really kind of made sense. It gave me purpose, really, which I was lacking and which I was missing, really. So it provided me with, I guess, like a path to redemption. Provided me with a way that I could go back and I could still achieve the things that I'd set out to achieve, because I mean, for myself, I'd always been bright at school, always kind of expected myself to, to achieve well and to do well, right? And that all kind of crumbled down. So being like a university dropout and like just kind of working in a coffee shop was not, where I kind of expected to be in life. And there was no real prospects for me at that point. So it really offered me a way back. Uh, yeah, a way to redemption in a lot of ways. Going back to give me a way to kind of, still carry on, still go forward, uh, rebuild my life and kind of still achieve all the things that I really wanted to achieve. So it gave me that. Once I qualified, I mean, it comes with, a stable career. It enabled me to like, kind of stand on my own 2 feet in a way that I didn't think was really possible. Especially like growing up in London, like trying to afford a house or trying to have any kind of stability in London is kind of crazy, right? But I moved out to Norwich. I've been living in Norwich for the last 7 years. And I've been able to kind of like, have my own place and like do my own thing. And that was, I guess, the purpose for a long time. Purpose for a long time was just to find that stability. But in a strange way, the journey really started once I'd found it. So I think like once you find that stability, it then becomes a question of like, okay, so now I'm not struggling to survive. What do I do? I've got this. I could do this for the rest of my life. I could have the same job and I could have, live
Yeah,
here forever. It's never going to be taken away from me. But now what do I do? What do I do with this? What do I do with what I have now? And I think, it's then that's really when I guess that's another phase of my life kind of began, I
yeah,
guess. Kind of looking out and thinking, okay, well, now that I found this, what can I do with it? Or like, after having done radiotherapy now I've been working for 7 years and I did 3 years of training. So I've been in radiotherapy for 10 years now. It was just looking at kind of, okay, so what's next? What do I do now? I think like, I suppose the purpose was about me initially. It was about like finding like solidity and stability for myself. And now it's about trying to broaden that and really trying to provide that for other people. And I think that gives me more meaning. I think, sometimes as a man as well, like, I've lived on my own. I've lived myself. I've been able to go out and do all the things that I want to do. But then I think after a certain point, you kind of realize that, there's not really, I think as a creature, like I'm quite simple, pretty happy. Like as long as I've got my basic needs met, there's not really much more that you need than that. And there's limits to kind of like how much you can do just for yourself. So I think the purpose right now is to try and now that I've been able to find that kind of stability for myself to expand it out to other people. It's a really long way of saying it, but yeah, that's where that's where we got to.
for sure, man. Such a story to battle a brain tumor and then to have that 10 years of survival, really. I can't imagine what that was like for you to be in survival mode for that long and to like you said, like the purpose was stability. The purpose was to survive. And that's just wild to me. And it goes back to it's amazing how we were created as human beings to at our core, it's kinda like our brain's job to keep us alive. And it's amazing how we will do whatever it takes to be alive, to stay alive. And at that, you learn that because we're in a society that's so much more comfortable, we've got all this technology that keeps us, like, really safe. Like, honestly, like, we're in houses, we're well fed. So a lot of times what we get scared of, and when it comes to this idea of fears, like fear of public speaking, fear of making video content, and to us, like our brain just sees it almost like a saber-toothed tiger or something. Like it looks at such these fears as such a like detrimental thing that can kill us and this unknown. But you literally faced something that could kill you, and it took 10 years to understand how to live with this limitation, but it was through understanding that limitation that you overcame it, and it's so great, and now you've got this newfound purpose to help other people overcome their limitations and overcome their limited beliefs, whatever it may be, and that's so interesting to me, and I love your story, I appreciate you for sharing it, and I'm curious, so you said you were in you did therapy, right? What therapy was that? My mic was kind of
Yeah, so radiotherapy. So radiotherapy is one of the ways that we treat mostly cancers and tumors. It's
I
useful. So it's using kind of high energy X-rays to target tumors essentially. So we kind of split it up over a course of treatment. So it gives you because it whatever kind of cells the treatment's incident on, it causes damage, right? So it causes cell damage to tumor cells and also to healthy cells.
oh, man.
But we try and kind of shield out as much of the healthy tissue as possible. And then you have kind of breaks in between the treatment to, hopefully let the healthy tissues recover whilst, to bring in enough dose to safely treat the cancer or the tumor that we're treating. So it's one of the main ways that we treat cancer. So most people, when they come and have cancer treatment, they'll have some combination of surgery, uh, chemotherapy, which is like systemic treatment, and radiotherapy, which is kind of more localized. And about half of all cancer patients will have radiotherapy at some point during their journey. So we can use it to treat and cure cancers. We can use it to help with symptom control and that kind of thing as well. So we can use it for like different types of things, but it has here quite a few applications.
Gotcha. That's so interesting. And then so you're still doing that, correct? You're still
Yeah.
doing that, and you're now life coaching as well?
I am building that up. So like I think COVID was a really tough time in the health sector and the healthcare,
For sure.
especially in the UK. I think the service it's completely changed since COVID. I think there was a definite kind of watershed moment before COVID and after COVID. There were problems and there were issues before, but I think they've been exacerbated since.
Sure.
And it's just meant that things. It's not really an easy place to work. It's not a. I mean, it never was, but like in terms of the pressures now, they're significantly higher than what they used to. And I think in some ways it was a case of progress can be quite slow and you're quite limited in sometimes what the change that you can bring. And then in the UK as well, there's a whole issue around pay because we've had like stagnating pay for the last over a decade. So for example, for my profession, there's only around just over 100 people that really qualify with my qualification every year. We've got a 10% vacancy rate across the country. We can't fill the vacancies. So in our last recruitment round, we weren't able to recruit anyone from the UK. Ended up hiring somebody from Zimbabwe. She's over here now. We've been training her. So like it just kind of shows you what the situation is kind of like. But I think it coming into this, it's been really kind of eye opening. Coming online, coming into like the creator space,
Mm,
it's really opened my eyes to a new world in a lot of
yeah.
ways. I think a lot of people have a lot of frustrations,
Mm,
and like everything kind of seems kind of outside of your control. And I think this has been a reminder that there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot of value that
yeah.
you can,
For
and I don't think there's ever been a better time. Me and you are two other opposite ends of the world, right?
Mhm.
We've been able to connect, we've been able to grow, we've been able to help each other along the way. And it's kind of been strange how like I found a lot of humanity online. You just kind of hear all the kind of doom stories about, this AI generation and they're going to live with VR headsets plugged to their face and they're never going to know what it is to interact with a human being. But to be honest, in some ways, I found a lot more humanity online than sometimes you find in the real world.
Yeah, for sure.
But even in our profession, it's like, if you want to progress, you have very narrow opportunities to do it. You have to do it in a very prescriptive way and you have to compete
Mhm.
with other people to get there. So sometimes, that causes friction, that causes
Mm.
tension. I'm out here online and it's like, there's an abundance, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's
It
sharing it.
it's wild, yeah, it's so wild to see, and just even with our Discord, how everyone's just helping everyone. It's beautiful to see. And again, like, and I was thinking about the technology aspect of this too, is we wanna totally bash AI sometimes, and we wanna bash technology, but the truth is, like, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You're in the UK, it's a completely different time, like we mentioned before we hit record, it's in the morning, or kinda early morning for us over here in the States, and you've already had almost like a full day, and it's crazy to me that we can connect and meet in real time. Whereas I was talking to some older friends of mine at this event I was at last night, and he had, like, walked away and left his phone, and they didn't know where he went for a while, and he came back, and they were like, "Yeah, but could you imagine back in the day when we didn't have phones?" It was like one of those, like, older guys just, like, back, and I was like, "No, I can't imagine that." Like, I wouldn't know half the people that I know now. Like, I wouldn't even have this potential career that I've started to grow, and it's so funny. It's so funny because, yeah, it's the humanity that's behind it all. Like, if you see it as a tool and you use it as a tool and not like something that's going to corrupt things, you'll see the beauty in it. Because you can't artificially make what we're having right now, like a human to human connection. Like, yeah, you can have a tool that'll help you, like, be better efficient or better productive, but it's that humanity aspect that, like, we connected, I heard your story, I emotionally was connected with the fact, wow, you went through a traumatic event that potentially could have ended your life, and it took 10 years to overcome that. And it's beautiful to see, and it's so interesting to me. So I'm curious, so now that you're starting this life coaching, what inspired you, and where do you find inspiration?
I think it's just realizing how many people are suffering and how many people are struggling. So I've seen it myself. Like I guess, like at work, we've had a lot of people leaving just through burnout, and I know that's something that you work with
Yeah.
people that are going through that. But I didn't really realize the level and the extent to which people are struggling. Because I suppose, especially in England, right, you put a brave face on it, you go forward, you stop a lip, you get on and you deal with it. But this is the first time I really saw, cracks in that and chinks in people's armor. And I guess for myself, it's just because, I've, because I guess it's just trauma, right? Everybody's gone through traumatic experience with COVID or, whatever it was, right? And for me, it was like I think having been through it as a process of that and kind of like having to kind of like, navigate your way through those difficulties beforehand, I think it just means equips you with certain skills and certain ways that you can, just be a friend to people, just really find a way to just help other people through that journey. And I think it's what a lot of people seem to be missing. It's really surprised me, like, the amount of people that I reach out to and they're like, they really have had, they've really been lacking that, just having somebody to talk to or somebody that you can lean on in those situations, which is, just kind of sad. I don't know what it says about our society and how we're going and how we're building things. But I really feel like it's, yeah, I feel like there's a change. I feel like there's been a change, and I feel like a lot of people are waking up to like a new reality. And I think, yeah, so for me, it was just really, it was eye opening in terms of like how many people need help, but also how much I can help. I think just by providing a listening ear, and I think like even like through my job as well. So being promoted kind of up through the ranks and like working in a working in a leadership capacity, more of a leadership capacity. And then, all of a sudden you're responsible for people. And then when you're responsible for people, you want to delve into kind of, how can I help you? Right. How can we make this work environment work best for you? What kind of things can we put in place? How can we support you? Right. When you start having those conversations, all sorts of things start to come up. But then you see the difference that the small things make. Just kind of, just by asking questions and just finding out about the people that you're working with, it can make such a big difference. So I think that's what kind of inspired. I think it's just kind of seeing it there in front of myself and actually seeing the difference that those kind of interactions can make. And I think like it just became when I really kind of like boil it down and distill it down, the thing that I really enjoy about my work is that person to person interaction. So it's like
Yeah.
coming in. So you have your patient that comes in. You don't have long with them. You only have maybe 10 to 15 minutes for a treatment. Um, but I know from my own experience that those 10 minutes can really make a massive impact. For myself, I remember the gratitude that I felt when I finished my treatment. And I've never like, I was young, I was 13, but I'd never felt that kind of depth of emotion before.
Mhm.
I remember going in, I took a little box of chocolates for the radiographers when I finished, but
Love
like
that.
it felt so insignificant. I was like, I can't believe these people don't know what they've done for me. But and the only way I can express my thanks is through this like box of chocolates, which seemed like nothing in comparison, right? But I think for a lot, and then I think for a lot of radiographers as well, I wish they understood that more, understood like the the difference just those words can make, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's the smallest things that you hold on to. I know we touched earlier about the my own experience of kind of like being in that kind of survival mode, that fight or flight, and really it was based off just one thing that my doctor said. My doctor had said they'd quoted some statistics to me when I received my diagnosis, and they told me about the treatment I was going to have. So in cancer care, it's quite common to quote 5 year survival statistics.
Yeah.
The 5 year survival for the kind of tumor that I had were really good. They're like in the 90s, right? 90%.
Wow.
So in my head, it's like if I can make it to 5 years, I'm fine.
Wow.
Okay. So like for me, like, until I got to that 5 year mark, I was like, I'm still dying. Like I'm not there until I get to 5 years. I need to get to 5 years. But that was for him was probably just a throwaway comment. It's
Yeah.
a statistic that he probably reveals off to I don't know how many people. But for me, of all the things that were said to me, there must have been hundreds of conversations. That's the one that stuck into my head. And that framed my life for the next decade, really. Just that one sentence, it really defined the next decade of my life. So I think it's just like having grasping kind of like the power that there is in that.
Mhm.
And then, like you say now with the technology, like there's never been a better time to do this.
Mhm.
Uh, I couldn't have, so I only started in April on Twitter, and like I couldn't have predicted how much I would learn in that time space. It's crazy. There's so much information out there and there's so much to learn. And it's really empowering. And I think that that runs really counter to, I think, how a lot of people feel about life and work. A lot of it feels completely disempowering and completely outside of your control. There's so much that you can't do. And you feel kind of like, you're enslaved to this kind of, well, you're kind of doomed to this life, right? There's not really much scope for maneuver. People are struggling. No, it's difficult to kind of, even afford basics for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then what do you do, right? And then this just seemed like, it just seemed like the right time for me to explore something
Yeah.
where I could invest in myself and I could do it. And I'm using the security that I've got, right? So I've still got my job. I've cut down my hours so I can work a bit more on kind of developing this side of things. But I started while I was still working full time. And, it just gives me that stability. So I know that, worst comes to worst, I can always fall back on what I do. Right. And I think then I'll always do radiotherapy in some form because it means something. But I think it's just having a bit more control over how big a part of my life it plays and able to, do things outside of that. I think I also realized that although like, it was my dream job, like I went into it with a clear purpose and I really knew that this is what I wanted to do. Like it felt right. And it's given me a lot. But then I guess over time I realized that it can't actually be everything. And you do have to have things, you have to have things outside of that to really live, a complete life.
For sure.
Because I think otherwise you just get frustrated. If you're expecting this one career, this one profession to give you everything to satisfy all of your needs as a
Yep.
person, you're bound to get frustrated.
Yeah, that's so good, and I agree. I feel like our lives are so holistic, and a lot of my own personal journey is
Mhm.
a large portion of my life, I fell victim to the idea that I had to perform and excuse me, it's early. My voice is still a little cracky. I had to perform and earn love and approval and acceptance for everyone. So I fell into that trap of needing to work hard and now don't get me wrong, working hard is good and it's important, but not at the expense of that becoming your identity. And especially over here in the States, when you have small talk with someone, it's what do you do? It's never how and the how are you is very, very surface level, but then it's what do you do? And it's almost like we've tied our identity into our career. And then you find something like the pandemic where literally everyone and their mom has to stay at home and do nothing. So you no longer do what you identify as. So then you're stuck in this place. And for me, I went through a whole like transformation in itself during the pandemic, realizing again who I was outside of what I did. And even before that, like, I mean, I had a 10-year rap career where I felt like I'm a man of faith, and I felt like God was leading me out of rap. And that was a big thing for me because I identified like Chance the Rapper. That's how I felt. Like he's Chance the Rapper. I felt like I was like redone the rapper. That was my rap name. And I had to go through this whole like rediscovery of who I was without doing the thing. And I feel like that's such an important thing that a lot of people miss. But to circle back to what you said, and really stuck out to me was this idea that words carry weight. And you mentioned how those words from when you were this young person dealing with this life changing, altering event of this brain tumor, it took one throwaway sentence for you to, like, be in sheer, like, panic mode, hoping that you would get to a certain destination, and now you kinda in the other position are able to really uplift people and to show them that it's so much more than what's going on, and they can overcome it, and I think that's beautiful, and I think we need more people like you in that space for sure. 'Cause I know that, younger you probably would say the same thing, like, you brought chocolates to that person because it was such a meaningful thing, and I think that's so encouraging. But I'm curious, I don't wanna take too much more time because obviously we've got some other things that we have to do, but I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. I I wanna pivot. I have one more a couple more questions for you. We'll get to one of these in a minute. I'm excited because I started a new section. Well, I'll explain that one when we get here. But before that, obviously, you're on Twitter, you're on a few other things. I'll be sure to get your info so I can put in the show notes so those listening and watching, they can connect with you. But if you wanna take a moment and kinda share where people can connect with you.
So I think the main way that I'm sharing at the minute is on Twitter. So if you follow me up, uh, so that's kind of where I found kind of my voice. I think it's where I found expression. I think coming back onto Twitter has really reignited a love for writing, which I'd lost. Like I remember like back in like high school, I used to write poetry and stuff, right? Then I stopped, didn't do that for like years, and then now all of a sudden I'm back writing, and that's been a kind of therapy in its own way. So like if you want to see kind of like me kind of expressing myself raw, that's kind of where I do it, and that's where I'm doing everything at the moment. That's really what I'm putting my energy into.
That's awesome. I love that. And there's something to be said too. A lot of my viewers and listeners are content creators as well. And I think that's an important tip in itself. You probably didn't realize you just gave a tip, but I heard it. And it's that idea of if you can put all of your focus into one space for for instance, for you, it's Twitter. And it's really easy to see the shiny objects. Now, I understand having multiple passions is important. Like, and not important, but, like, it's possible. But the thing is, if you could focus on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days, if you could focus on Instagram or TikTok, whatever it may be that you could focus on for extended amount of time, you will see growth. Like, for me, I focused on TikTok for, like, a year. I started at 0. I made 3 videos a day for over a year, and over that time, what happened was I got a lot more comfortable on camera. Now you see we're having these conversations and it's like nothing. Now the first time I was on camera, I was terrified and it just flows out. But I say like if you're able to commit yourself to one specific thing and fall in love with the process of it, because a lot of times we as creators, we as people in general, we get so focused on the end result that it's very easy for us to be like, "Oh, I'm never gonna get there. I've got 2 followers. I've got 10 followers. I want thousands and hundreds of thousands." But if you could fall in love with building the connections with people, if you could fall in love with the process of it, like you said, writing has became therapy for you, and I think that's beautiful. And while doing that, you've already succeeded, right? It's like you could have no one read it or you could have 100,000, a million people read it. And either way, you would be satisfied because you already got what you needed from it. And I think that a lot of times when it comes to us people that consider ourselves creative, I think it was Will.i.am, he said it in a podcast, and he was like, if you're a true creator, you're not so focused on other people's opinion of creating. Well, how did he put it? He was like, "It's like throwing up." He's like, you have to," and it sounds like such a gross metaphor, but it's so true. It's like, it's gotta come out of you, and I feel like that's how it is with a lot of us that consider ourselves creative people, and even entrepreneurs. I feel like you've gotta get it out. Like, when you've been given something inside of you that, like, you're so passionate about, you've gotta get it out there, because if you keep it inside, it's only gonna eat you up inside. So it's super interesting to hear that. But yeah, to go off that tangent and a little bit more to that practicality of it. Yeah, if you listening at home, if you're looking for a practical something from today's podcast, I would say is find what makes you come alive most and what makes you feel like you have a voice. Like, for instance, Ahab, he found that his voice, his therapy is Twitter. So he's running with it. And I encourage you at home to find that and do the same. Now, as we sort of begin to land the plane for today, I have 2 questions. Okay, I have 3 questions for you. I lied. 3 questions. With the first one being, so I always enjoy asking this question because I feel like it, and I feel like with you having a unique perspective of survival and death, I feel like you're gonna give a great answer. So, you're at the end of your life. We'll picture this. You're at the end of your life, you've accomplished the things you wanna accomplish, you've got the family if you want the family, you got all the things that you wanted to do and then some, and you're on your deathbed. What do you wanna be remembered for, Ahab?
What do you want to be remembered for? That's a really, really good one. I think what I'd want to be remembered for is just the feeling that you brought, right? And I think that's what resonates. Um, I think when people think back, when you think back, when you think back to anybody, I think you always go back to that feeling that you felt with them. Um, so I think that's what I'd want to be remembered, how I made other people feel.
So good. Now, this next question is, I like to flip it. So me being the man full of questions for my guest, I like to, while getting towards the end, I like to ask my guest, "Do you have any questions for me?"
I need to hear about his rap career, man.
Dang it, I thought I was gonna sneak by that. Yeah, what would you like to hear about it? Just, I guess,
What's the
the
story? Like you said that
story.
you're a man of God. You're active with the church. I know you do music, so you play drums. So how
Sure,
does it? Where did it all kind of fit into you? Like where did what? Yeah, what was that for you? What was the what?
for
Explain
sure.
that journey to me.
So I was even thinking about this the other day. So I don't know if grade levels translate everywhere, but for me, so middle school, so like 7th grade, I don't know if 7th grade makes sense for the UK, but before high school, before uni, so like I think I was probably like 13 or 14 years old, 15 maybe. No, I wasn't even 15, I was probably 13. I was in an art class. So I started taking art as an elective in school because you can take, like, different non, like, academic classes in school in US. So I started taking art, and I was in an art class, and I had a super cool teacher named Miss Holt, and she would let us listen to the radio. So I came from, like, listening to emo music, alternative rock. That's kinda where I was at in that time. Some country because my family listened to country, not a fan of country now, but and we were listening to the radio, and this guy that was in my class put it on a hip hop station, and I'm in Texas, so, like, even the subculture of hip hop there is, like, Southern rap, like Bun B, Lil Wayne was, like, really fresh on the scene kinda thing. So I heard rap for the first time around that time, and whatever it was, I was just like, at first, I didn't like it. It was funny, and the reason I didn't like it was because it was almost forced on me because the guy in the class was kinda like the bully, and he was like, "We're gonna listen to rap, nothing else." And he was like, at one point, he even, like, threatened me to not change the station. It was a story in itself. But, like, for whatever reason, the more I heard it, it felt like an escape for me. And that's the best way that I could describe it. Because at the time, like, we would my family's great, but, all families have their bickering and their arguments, and when you're that young, like, you're really impressionable, and for me, like, it was a way that if I put on my headphones, I could go somewhere else, and when I gravitated towards, like, Lil Wayne and then a little bit later on, Drake and, like, these And Eminem even, like, and it was the wordplay for me. It was the wordplay, it was the visual imagery that their lyrics brought to me. That's what I fell in love with, and just the culture of hip hop. Breakdancing, there was a time that I would break dance with a little crew of mine, so I really, like, put myself all the way in hip hop, and it's funny, I like to say that hip hop raised me, but it also ultimately saved me because there's Christian hip hop as well, and it's actually really good, not what you would expect. And I remember actually hearing some of that a little bit later in this love of hip hop and being like, "Whoa, like there's this faith in God aspect that you can bring to hip hop," and it was such a foreign thing to me. And long story short, I wrote my first rap in 2008, and again, I started rapping because it was an escape for me. 'Cause at some point, we moved cities, and when we moved cities, my mom was, like, super protective of me, so she was like, "You're not gonna go out." So I was like all I had was after school was a little beat up laptop and this free software to record a song, so I was like, "Man, if I can't go out, I might as well be productive and cool, I'll write my own rap," and that's kinda where it started, and I just fell in love with the process of making music and writing raps and rapping. I rapped for a while, I did a few shows here and there, random things as I got older, and at some point, that Christian rap had planted this seed of faith in me, and we were kinda in church, kinda not in church, and then right after I graduated high school, I went through, like, a fairly serious breakup, and I was like, "This is the end of my life." Like, you're so dramatic at that time, but, like, I was extra dramatic, and then a friend of mine invited me to a church, and they had this, like, block party, I guess you could say, and it was really strange. I was like, "Churches have block parties? Like, what is this life?" And there was a rapper performing at it, and, like, when I tell you I felt the spirit of God through his rap, it was amazing, and I was like, "This is I wanna do this." So I kinda, like, shifted, and I started making Christian rap myself, and, like, I got saved, I believed in Jesus Christ, this whole, like, radical transformation in my life, and then it began this whole journey within itself that it is now. But yeah, like, and it's crazy because it's like hip hop raised me because it was like my escape and where I could, like, find who I was, and then it became my identity, and then, like, I found God through it essentially, and then, yeah, it saved me too, and I still have a special place for hip hop. Like, I still love some of the classics and even some of the newer stuff. It's such a special thing to me, but me personally rapping, I don't really rap as far as writing rap and taking it as a career anymore, because it was one of those things, like, I had to find the identity outside of it, but yeah, man, it's such a fun time. It was such a fun season, for sure.
Sounds amazing. And I really resonate with what you said there, about finding kind of identity outside of it. Like when I was in high school, I was I became a fan of acting. And like, so we used to have like our drama classes. So I'd be there. For a time, actually got really good because I
Okay.
spent all my time in there. Like that was my space where I could just like create something completely different. And it was kind of weird because I think now when I look back, I was really enjoying being somebody else. Like I could take you to the nth degree, I could really dive into somebody else's shoes, recreate them like with all the different like movements of my face or like how I look at my voice and all those kinds of
Mhm.
things. But then, yeah, really since then, it's been the process of actually just being comfortable being me, just like that, doing
Yeah,
that bit. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, what you said there, like that really hit. Yeah.
it's so good, and I agree. Like, I can remember being that kid that wanted to be a chameleon. 'Cause it was
Yeah.
like cause for me, when I was especially in middle school, like, everyone's trying to figure out who they are, and I didn't wanna be who I was. Like, I was like, "I wanna be everything," 'cause I was just so universal with my friend groups, and I never understood it either. Cause I was like, "Why can't the country people be friends with the sporty people, be friends with the emo people?" Cause it was just very in that space, you really had to pick a lane. Like, it wasn't like now where I feel like you can be so so broad spectrum. And for me, I was like, I would just like shape shift into everything that I could be to the point where everyone was like, "Oh, you're a poser." And that was a big form of it. People were like, "You gotta pick a place." And I'm like, man, I can't do that. But again, it's like you said, it's like I could go to the nth degree and like fully become a character. And it was so interesting because it took years to realize, but who am I? What is my true character? And it was so interesting to see. But I have one more question for you, and I actually need to pull it up on here. So I got a new segment. I'm really excited about this. I just started it with the last one I recorded yesterday. So and you'll get to ask a question as well. So I got inspired by Diary of a CEO. It's another podcast out there. Dude's amazing. And he ends with asking a question from the previous guest. So I have a question from the previous guest.
Question that I would have for your next guest is, how do you keep confidence consistent?
So I think it starts with being comfortable being vulnerable. So I think you can only have absolute stability when you're absolutely comfortable being vulnerable, right? Because if you're trying to hold on to anything, if that thing gets taken away from you, you're not gonna have that confidence anymore. So you have to be 100% confident being vulnerable, and then you can't be shaken, right? If you're standing, then that would be my answer to that.
Man, that's so good. I love that. And I agree. One big pillar of what I say with a lot of my clients and a lot of this podcast is vulnerability is our super strength. It's our superpower. And especially men, because I feel like that's another area that I feel very strongly about is helping men see that they can both be tough and tender and they can be men, but also embrace the vulnerability of sharing the emotions that we go through. So yeah, that's so good. I love that answer. But with that, so now you get to ask a question for whoever my next guest will be.
I think it's gonna be the harder bit. So I can ask whatever I want.
Anything. Yeah, it could be anything. It could be silly, it could be serious, it could be whatever.
Okay. So my question is going to be,
Was that not a fire conversation? I know you're going to leave better than before you tuned into it. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to hit the subscribe button on screen. And if you want to continue watching more inspiring and encouraging content, you can click here. If you really got something out of this, or if you have any feedback so that we can make this show even better, don't hesitate, drop a comment below. As always, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.